Hey everyone, and welcome back to our second topic, variables. Well, to give you the definition of variables, it is storage locations with assigned names that store data and change values. So consider variables as a temporary name or location for an actual data. Now, variables can hold numbers, strings, or whatever you want it to hold. It's just so that you can use that same value again and again during the program. For example, you were to print the output of two numbers like 36 and 6. So I'm gonna go ahead and print that. As you can see, I did get my output of 42. But what if I want to be able to access this number many more times in the program? Well, this is when I'm gonna assign the value 42 to a variable. Now the variable can be named anything. In this case, I'm just gonna name it A. So A is equal to 36 plus 6. Print A. I get my output again. And I can go on to use this value of A or 42 many more times in my code. Or let's say I want another output in which I want to add 6 to 42 again. So B is equal to A plus 6. And I can go ahead and print B. So I hope you have understood why we will use variables. Or just think of it as a jar. Okay. So now you have a jar, and let's say the item that you want to save is the data. I'm gonna think of it as chocolate cookies. Now I put my chocolate cookies in the jar, and I name the jar something, say ABC. So ABC becomes my variable name, and a jar acts as a place for holding the data, which is the chocolate cookie. So that was an introduction to variables. Going ahead, we're going to be talking about naming variable and the norms around it as well. Now, Python has some rules and regulations when it comes to naming your variables. And not following these rules can cause your program to give multiple errors and even crash. So in order to these errors, we're just going to go ahead and follow the rules that they have. So right off the bat, I'm going to tell you that you can't have any spaces when it comes to naming your variables. Secondly, another important note is that Python is a case sensitive language, which means that using uppercase and lowercase does differentiate between a variable. So naming your variable a is different from naming your variable a small a. Another important thing to remember is coding in Python is much more simpler than coding in any other language. So it does give you the advantage of not having to declare your variable in advance. For example, if you were programming in Java, you'd have to declare whether your variable is an int data type, in which case it can only store an integer number, or whether it is a string data type, in which case it can only hold a string data value. So I'm just gonna go ahead and give some example of naming variables. Let's say I wanted a variable that stored the name or any name, right? So name is equal to Elon Musk. Now, remember one more thing, that whenever you're naming a variable, just make sure it makes some sense to the data it is holding, so that when you use it throughout the program, you just remember what the variable is and what value it actually holds. I'm gonna go ahead and just print name, because that's the advantage of a variable, right? As you can see, it's giving me an output. Let's say I want to hold the word Elon in a different variable and the word Musk in a different variable. So I'm gonna go ahead and write first name is Elon. And as you can see that this throws an error, that is because you can't have a space. So what you can do is, if you in case instead of a space, is you can use an underscore, and it kind of acts in the same way, right? Take another one. Last name is equal to Musk. And now I could concatenate these two strings and put it in another variable. So name is equal to first name plus last name. Now I know you guys might be confused as to what concatenation is. Well, don't worry, we're gonna be talking about that when I come to the lecture on strings and everything. So right now it's fine. So print name. There you go. Oops, 1 second. Well, there you go. We got our output, right? So yes, just remember that you can't have spaces when it comes to naming your variable. Python's a case sensitive language too, so just make sure that you differentiate between the uppercase and the lowercase. At the same time, you can't have any spaces, right? Um, Another important thing is that you can have numbers, letters, and special characters, whatever you want in your variable name, but you can't start naming your variable with a number. For example, let's say the value you want to hold is 56. So you can't name your variable 123 var, but you can store it as var 123. There you go. As you can see, we did get our output as well, and it did not throw any errors. Now I'm gonna be talking about certain keywords. So now Python has certain reserved keywords, which means you can't use these as your variable names because then the code will throw an error. For example, def is a keyword, right? Def is equal to, let's say, Sid. If I go on to print def, it throws an error. Well, that's because def is used to declare a function. We're going to be talking about that later. But just think of it as def is a reserved keyword, so you can't use it as a variable name. Now, obviously, when you'll be programming more often, you'll realize what keywords are and what keywords aren't, so you won't make that mistake. But there is another way you can check whether the variable that you're naming is a keyword or it isn't, is by the help of this keyword function. So you'll have to import a library. It's called import keyword, and you could simply do print keyword is keyword, and let's say string, right? False, which means that string is not a reserved keyword, and you can use string as a name of your variable. Let's try def. There you go, true, which means that def is a reserved keyword, and you can't use it as a name for your variable. So I hope you have an understanding around naming your variables and the norms that you have to follow. Another thing I want to familiarize you guys with is overwriting. So for example, I declare a variable a and give it the value as 56 over here. Print a. Oops, sorry. Print a. I can always go ahead and change this value. So if I write a is equal to 65, print a, the old value of a has been lost. So if I was like, man, this hard. As you can see, the old value of a has been lost. So if you've already declared a variable with a certain value and you rewrite that variable name and give it another value, the old value will be lost because Python's just going to overwrite it. So it's going to overwrite the new value over the old value. I hope you guys understood what it means to like name a variable and the rules you should be following. Going ahead, we're going to be using variables very often, so it's very important that you guys understand. Hi everyone, today we're going to be talking about assignment operators. So let's say you have a variable count, correct? And you've given it the value 56. And let's say you just want to increment the value of count by a certain number. So you can go ahead and write count is equal to count plus 5. Print count, and you get your output as 61. Let me explain this to you once so you guys do understand what's happening. So we've taken a variable count and given it the value 56. We've gone ahead and incremented the value of count, which means that we wanted to change the value of count and not have to create another variable for it. So you just make sure that count equals to count plus 5. Remember what I told you about overwriting in the previous tutorial? So this is exactly what's happening. But what if we want to be more efficient with our code? What if we want to make this shorter? So over here, we're going to do count plus equals 5. When I go ahead and print it, as you can see, I get the same output. This formula or this system of writing or of incrementing a certain value can be used for different operations. For example, subtraction, multiplication, division, or even to get the power of a certain number. So let's go ahead and try it out. I'm going to name a variable abc is equal to 5, and let's do abc minus equals 3. Go ahead and print abc. I got my output s2. Let's say you don't want to subtract it, but instead want to multiply it. So you go ahead and multiply it. Well, there you have it. 5 3s are 15. Let's check out division now, correct? I'm going to do abd is actually let's make the variable name have some sense, correct? So I'm just going to write num as in for number and give it the value of 18, and num, I'm going to do division equals 6, print num. So basically you're just dividing the value of num, which is 18, by another number 6, and you're putting that value again into num. So 3.0. If I was to expand this is what it loosely translates to. Num is equal to num divided by 6. So this is basically just a shortened version of this. You can choose to write it however you want. I always choose to write it like this because I get a better understanding of my program, but if you wish to write lesser words or lesser characters, then you can go ahead and do this. This is also as abc is equal to abc into 3. Let's try out getting the power of a number, right? So I'm gonna do num2 equals 5, and num2 power sign equals 2. Print num2, and I believe I should get 25 in there. 25. So I hope you guys got a basic understanding of what this tutorial was about. It was being able to use assignment operators to override the value of a certain variable. You could use it for multiplication, division, subtraction, addition, and even to get the power, or you could even use it to get the integer division. If you guys remember what that was, it basically gives you the quotient of the answer except in int format and not float. So I think I'll go ahead and try that out as well. Num3 is equal to, let's say, 18, and num3 equals 6, print num3, and I'm gonna get just 3, not 3.0, just 3. If I was to just use a normal division, I'm gonna get 3.0. So you can see the difference here. Well, this is it for today's lecture, and well, I hope you guys had a good understanding. Hey everyone, so I'm sure if you watched my tutorials before, you know what the print function does, but I still wanted to make a tutorial on this, so in case if some of you have certain doubts, questions, or even a confusion about this, well, after this tutorial, you wouldn't. So print function basically just prints whatever you want. It could be a string. I'm gonna run the code, and there you go, print string. It can even print values of variables. Let's say if a is equal to 56, print a, and it does what you ask it to do. You could even perform a mathematical operation within these brackets, and the print function would go ahead and print that. For example, I could print a divided by 8, and it will return the value of 7.0. I could use the integer division, and it will return the value as just 7. So a print is a very basic function in Python. It just helps you print whatever you want on the terminal window.